the US men's national team aren't just underachievers, they're unlikable. A headline on the state of the USMNT. It's honestly a very brutal headline. The article is sensational, but it touches on some interesting points. In football terms, the men's department of the United States Soccer Federation was once seen as an exciting underdog with fledgling opportunity and a lack of resources and professionals. But those who were there nonetheless would die for the flag on the pitch. This is no longer the case. We are witnessing what many have labeled a golden generation for the country. There are players scattered all across the top European leagues. Many are flourishing. Many have already achieved incredible things that others before them failed to even get close to. This should be their moment. But
what are you guys going to do? Are you going to continue to be a bunch of soft, underperforming, tattooed millionaires? You are a soccer generation that has been given everything. You are a soccer generation who is on the verge of squandering everything. So, now it's time to pay it back. Make us believe again. You don't owe it to yourselves. You owe it to us.
Ironically, football in general is experiencing rapid growth in the US, and you would imagine that there is a very bright future ahead overall. But with the biggest trophy of them all being scheduled to be held on local grounds, a declining approval sentiment for the national team is not an ideal burden to bear. But it wasn't always like this, which is why we're here today. This video is not about piling onto the misery of USMNT supporters. It's also not about the US women's team, which is conversely the best women's national team of all time. They will get their own, probably more positive video. This one is about diving into the wacky, convoluted, oftentimes impressive, yet frequently comical history of the US men's national team. In a way, football in the United States has always been an underdog story. In the early 20th century, a handful of visionaries struggled to plant the seeds of the beautiful game in American soil. A man by the name of Thomas Cahill was among the founders of United States Football Association and served as its first secretary. By the looks of it, nobody is credited with being more influential for the initial push for the game in the country. He dedicated his life to spreading the sport across a nation obsessed with baseball and gridiron. Soccer had flickers of popularity, but no broad national appeal. Still, Cahill and his contemporaries pressed on. In 1916, 19, and 20, Cahill took US teams on tours of Scandinavia, a symbolic effort to show that Americans could embrace the global game. There were no big crowds or celebrity players, just a belief that America could love football if given the chance. And perhaps, if they did give it more of a chance, what happened next may have kickstarted something unthinkable. The US were amongst the first to join FIFA in the early 20th century and were on the mailing list when the biggest cup of them all was being put together. 1930, the first World Cup in Uruguay. 13 nations answered the call to compete in a distant land. Many of the world's elite did decline the offer, but the United States team arrived by ocean liner after an 18-day journey. They bring with them a crew of semi-pro players, many the sons of recent immigrants, with a Scottish-American coach at the helm. By all accounts, they are outsiders in this tournament, and furthermore, all their mates back home couldn't care less. It's reported that no American journalists made the trip with the boys, but once the matches began, the Americans stunned everyone, including probably themselves. In their opening game, the US defeats Belgium 3-0. After that, they take down Paraguay, runners-up of the Copa America only a year prior, and see themselves through to the semifinals. Fun fact, in their victory versus Belgium, US keeper Jimmy Douglas keeps the first clean sheet ever recorded in World Cup history. In their victory over Paraguay, a 20-year-old kid by the name of Bert Paternotte scores the first ever recorded hat-trick registered at a World Cup. However, because of shoddy match reporting, some sources claimed his second goal was an own goal. FIFA's official records credited his teammate Tom Flory with the goal. It was only in 2006, almost 80 years later, that the history books were corrected thanks to an effort from Colin Jose, a North American soccer historian. I don't know about you, but if the US sent some press, I doubt it would have taken this long. Sadly, the semifinals brought the mighty Argentina, who steamrolled the US 6-1, ending the Cinderella run. Still, the Americans finished in third place, a World Cup medal position that remains their best ever finish. A team from a country where the sport barely registers suddenly ranked third in the world. Circumstances aside, the fact that a lot of nations refused to participate in this tournament and all that, symbolically, nobody would blame you for thinking that perhaps this would lead to more of a focused effort on growing the sport. Instead, the players returned home to modest fanfare. In Depression-era America, soccer wasn't exactly on most people's minds. Makes sense. The truth is that sustaining that success would prove confusingly complex. The glory of the 1930 World Cup would soon be shrouded in decades of obscurity, making it seem like a mystery how such a feat ever happened. But that doesn't mean that there weren't moments, although perhaps fleeting, that don't still glitter within the history books. Fast forward 20 years. World War II has come and gone, and the World Cup resumes in 1950. The United States team travels to Brazil and is, if anything, more of an underdog than in 1930. Soccer still hasn't picked up much traction back home, and many of the players are still semi-professionals or outright amateurs, juggling day jobs as dishwashers, mailmen, teachers, you know the deal. They're drawn in a group with the mighty England. Americans are given no chance. The English are the inventors of modern football. This is the 4th edition of the competition, and for various political reasons, including the English FA and FIFA having historical beef, is the World Cup debut for England. They are favorites to win the whole thing and have a point to prove. On June 29, 1950, an American team of relative nobodies faces an English side studded with stars. What unfolded that day has been enshrined in US soccer law as the miracle on grass. England began the game strong, and then in the 37th minute, out of nowhere came the diving header of Joe Gaetjens. Goal. USA 1, England 0. The crowd was in disbelief. This remains one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history, potentially the greatest. In England, legend has it some editors assumed that the 0-1 scoreline was a typo and that England had actually won 10-1. Brazilian fans, losing their mind, carried Gaetjens off the field on their shoulders as if he were a conquering hero. He was. The win became the stuff of legends, later inspiring books and even a movie. All 11 American players from that match would eventually be inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame in 1976. It was a high point, but quite frankly, it wasn't as highly regarded as you might think. This was the only game the US won in the tournament. They finished bottom of their group and 10th overall out of 13 teams. By the time he died in 1951, it's believed that Thomas Cahill thought his 50 years of effort had come to nothing, that soccer's moment in America had passed. Soccer in the United States had slipped back into the shadows. There was no significant professional league to speak of. Other American sports boomed. Baseball's golden age, the birth of the NBA, and the NFL's continued rise, while soccer languished as an afterthought. The US national team failed to qualify for every World Cup from 1954 through 1986. The truth was, there just wasn't a sustainable system to develop talent or maintain interest. Without regular competition or investment, the USMNT drifted aimlessly all the way through the 50s and 60s. But something was happening on a grassroots level. Immigrant communities kept the flame alive in local leagues. At the youth level, more kids were playing as it was seen as safer than the brutal nature of the NFL or the hard surfaces of a basketball court. By 1966, a surprising thing happened. Over 1 million Americans tuned in on TV to watch England lift the World Cup. Sensing an opportunity, investors launched a new pro league in 1968. The North American Soccer League. I've covered this crazy period of glamour and superstardom celebrity in this video, so I won't go into it in too much detail here. But to give you a high-level overview, popularity of the game boomed. The world's best, including Pele, Johan Cruyff, Franz Beckenbauer, and many more, hit the shores of New York. The New York Cosmos almost single-handedly put the game on the map. 40,000 people would routinely watch matches week in, week out. Sadly, the powers that be were losing money essentially the entire time. Cash was splashed and nowhere near enough was coming back to justify it. It all came tumbling down just as fast as it went up, back to square zero. Even worse, the national team itself was in a state of decay. NASL clubs prioritized aging foreign stars over developing American talent. It was a very expensive disaster. Still, the taste for American soccer had not been forgotten. In the mid-80s, US officials made a bold gamble. They would bid to host the 1994 World Cup, believing it could jumpstart the sport's growth for good. Many around the world scoffed. How could a country with no functioning league host the planet's biggest football tournament? But in 1988, FIFA awarded the World Cup in '94 to the US, placing a huge vote of confidence and pressure on American soccer. A large contributing factor to this decision was the highly successful 1984 Summer Olympic Games held in America. Because they quite frankly didn't have one, the nation had to build a competitive team from the ashes or risk embarrassment on home soil. Once again, the USMNT was an underdog with everything to prove. They made inroads by qualifying for the 1990 World Cup on merit. However, the same tournament was a harsh reality check. They lost all 3 group matches, conceding 8 goals and scoring just twice, 23rd out of 24 teams. But you could argue that simply being there was a victory in itself. World Cup hosts qualify by default. This tournament signaled that the US could qualify. With the 1994 World Cup looming at home, US soccer took steps to professionalize. Many national team players were kept together in a sort of residency program, essentially functioning as a club team since there was no top-tier pro league. Only 8 players were officially registered as professionals with the club, and the rest were either part-time or simply paid by the US Federation to train in the lead-up. Come the summer of '94, massive American stadiums, the Rose Bowl, the Pontiac Silverdome, filled with fans from all around the world. The US team, now under Serbian coach Bora Milutinovic, was transformed and ready to compete. And compete they did. In the opener, the US earned a 1-1 draw with Switzerland, highlighted by a stunning free kick goal by Eric Wijnaldum. This match actually featured 2 stunning free kicks. What are the odds? And then came a 2-1 win over Colombia. Now this was a match that unfortunately had deadly repercussions. Colombian defender Andres Escobar scored an own goal in this game and was brutally murdered back home weeks later. It's reported that the killer shouted "goal" after every shot, once for each time a football commentator had said it during the broadcast. The Americans went on to qualify for the round of 16 and set up a match with the Brazilians in front of 84,000 fans. To add more symbolism to the occasion, it was on the 4th of July. Unfortunately, the stars did not align. 1-0 to the eventual winners of the entire competition. There's no shame in going out like that. The 1994 World Cup was a turning point culturally. Average Americans took notice of the sport in a new way. Over 94,000 fans packed the Rose Bowl for the final. The success of the event spurred US soccer to finally launch a sustainable professional league, Major League Soccer or MLS in 1996, as a condition of hosting. But even beyond the infrastructure, '94 gave the USMNT an identity: scrappy, physical, never-say-die players that could spring a surprise. Players like Alexi Lalas and the iconic red goatee and Kobe Jones became pop culture figures for a spell. For a generation of kids, names like Tab Ramos, John Hawkes, and Claudio Reyna became inspirations. The emotional high was real. The story of the USMNT is a funny one. It always seems like they're on the verge of a breakthrough, only for the full weight of reality to kick in. In 1998, expectations were higher than ever, but they lost all 3 games and finished 32nd out of 32 teams. Of course, there was drama along the way. John Hawkes was the captain and leader of American football in this period, one of the only ones at that point in the team with long-standing international experience. Such was his social standing in the team that head coach Steve Sampson declared that Hawkes was captain for life while the team qualified for the 1998 World Cup. He was then dropped from the squad for the World Cup and nobody knew why. Sampson claimed it was because of leadership issues. Over a decade later, the truth came out. It was revealed that Hawkes had been dropped because he was sleeping with Eric Wijnaldum's wife, one of his teammates. This has since been confirmed by multiple sources. But like I said, the situation around the team ebbs and flows. Hype levels regularly go from, guys, it's over, to we are so back. Something you have to understand about American culture is that it's built on optimism. People truly believe they can make it even when under the most dire circumstances, and all it takes is hard work and grit. And you can see it in the pride of the flag that's on full display for the world to see. Few, if any, countries are this patriotic. In football terms, the team in semi-recent American history that most supporters will point to that epitomizes that idea is the 2002 World Cup side. Under Bruce Arena, the US entered the World Cup in South Korea as relative longshots. Then, they shocked Portugal 3-2 in their opener, a result no one saw coming. The Portugal side, full of global stars, was run off the field by American players' pace and determination. Young player of the tournament, a 20-year-old Landon Donovan, announced himself to the world. Brad Friedel, Brian McBride, John O'Brien, and many more. They flew past Mexico in the round of 16 by 2-0. It's a game still spoken about today for obvious geopolitical reasons. They met Germany in the final, but sadly lost by 1-0. And you know what? If the age of VAR was around back then, perhaps that wouldn't be the case. Germany was saved thanks to a clear handball on the goal line from a Greg Berhalter shot. If that went in, who knows what could have happened, because the US played the rest of the game in fantastic form. I rewatched this game while making this video purely because it's widely believed to be the best game in the history of the USMNT by most people still alive today. And can you believe it? It was a loss. And this is what I mean when I speak about that indomitable spirit of US culture. If you truly put in the effort, you get love in return, which is why sentiment around these boys was and still is riding high. Landon Donovan rose higher and higher and became the face of the team and the country's all-time leading goal scorer from the midfield. Clint Dempsey is a man whose point of origin is elusive to many.
Clint Dempsey said that to me when he was at Fulham. I tackled him and he pushed me. I said, don't push you. You don't know where I'm from, dog.
But he was just a gritty kid from a Texas trailer park. He made a mark on the Premier League and brought an unapologetic swagger to the national team. In the round of 16 against Belgium in the 2014 World Cup, Tim Howard delivered one of the most iconic performances of any goalkeeper, 15 saves, a record for any World Cup match. And the Americans went toe-to-toe with Belgium in this match, very easily could have come out on top. Very easily could have won the game in normal time, and very easily could have pushed the game to penalties if Clint Dempsey was able to bury this chance. The players in this era brought a strong core and cultural identity to the side, carrying the torch from that 1994 side. Many stars on the team were hitting the mainstream. They were relatable, flawed in their own ways, and absolute warriors on the field. In 2009, in the Confederation Cup semi-final, the US beat Spain 2-0, soon to be World Cup champions and reigning European champions. In 2010, they topped their World Cup group in South Africa with a dramatic Landon Donovan winner late in the 91st minute of that game. More bragging rights over England. The CONCACAF Gold Cup was theirs more often than not. And this is where the opinion prevails that it felt like a tipping point. By the mid-2000s to 2010s, US soccer had more resources than ever. A new wave of young talent was emerging. The MLS was growing, providing a professional environment for many players. Global superstars were entering the field, attracting more eyeballs to the game. On paper, it looked like the long-awaited golden generation might be arriving. Looking back, many now feel that the golden generation that was promised was actually on their way out. We've spoken about players and splashed a couple stories here and there, but now let's laser in and focus on the guys in charge, the coaches. 2011, German legend Jürgen Klinsmann is hired as coach. Klinsmann preached a new vision, a more proactive, possession-based game. Opinions on the man are mixed, to say the least. He started the trend of tapping into America's talent pool by looking at players with dual citizenship. players who may have already had international experience in countries with very competitive leagues. This included John Brooks and Fabian Johnson, to name a few. Coincidentally, many were predominantly German, but that's not important. He made it out of this group in the 2014 World Cup. As an invited guest to the 100-year anniversary of the Copa America, the US came fourth. There's a lot of positivity, but Klinsmann was also a lightning rod for controversy. He infamously cut Landon Donovan from the 2014 World Cup that shocked fans and media. Klinsmann's own son tweeted, then deleted this when it happened. This all but confirmed what many had suspected. There was bad blood between Klinsmann and Donovan. Donovan took a sabbatical from playing for mental health reasons around 2011, but he was still very capable on his return. Klinsmann viewed him as uncommitted to the team or his career, as he missed several World Cup qualifiers. Donovan has negatively spoken out about Klinsmann's man management in years gone by too. The US did no worse than usual in 2014 without Donovan, but it created a narrative of drama. What's a surefire way to alienate an entire country? Banish their best ever player after he took some time off to clear his head. That's how the story read, at the very least. Bruce Arena, the old hand, was brought back to steady the ship in 2016, nightmare time. On the final match day of the 2018 qualifiers, the US face up to Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Trinidad and Tobago have already missed out on qualification, and really, they're just there for vibes. The US need just a draw to qualify for the playoffs, a win to secure full qualification. They lose 2-1.
And it's Alvin Jones! One for the legend book! You kidding me? We can't beat Trinidad on a field that's too wet and too heavy? What are we doing? What are we doing? That should have never happened with the $1 billion plus that is going into Major League Soccer and youth development.
It wasn't just about one game. It was about all the systematic shortcomings it exposed. The US had poured resources into the sport, a professional league, youth academies, big coaching salaries, yet here they were, bested by a tiny nation that literally had nothing to play for. The system failed them. Christian Pulisic was probably wondering if he should have declared for Croatia. His 2018 may have been a lot different. In the following years, in came Greg Berhalter to save the day. We mentioned him earlier, former player during the best era. The US won the inaugural CONCACAF Nations League, following it up with another and a Gold Cup. The core of the team was looking better. Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, and a cohort of players mostly under 25. The USMNT qualified for the 2022 World Cup, returning to the big stage with a renewed sense of purpose. Standard round of 16 exit. But ironically, the biggest drama unfolded off the field. A real-life case study showcasing everything wrong with the system. Toxicity, arrogance, entitlement, even nepotism. In early 2023, at a private leadership conference, Berhalter mentioned in a private conversation that he had a player in Qatar he almost sent home for a bad attitude and a lack of effort. Though he didn't name names, apparently everyone knew who he was talking about, and news got out. 20-year-old Giovanni Reyna was included in the World Cup squad, but he saw very little playing time. Behind the scenes, he apparently wasn't being much of a team player. This was kept private during the tournament, as one would expect. Gio Reyna is the son of Claudio Reyna, another former US legend from that generation and apparently best friends with Berhalter. Reyna was the best man at Berhalter's wedding, and the two had known each other for long before that. The Reyna family was reportedly furious of the boy's lack of playing time and these leaks. So, as one does, Gio's mother, Danielle Reyna, informed the US Federation that Greg Berhalter had physically assaulted his then-girlfriend, now wife, in 1991. Coincidentally, both Berhalter and Reyna's wives were college roommates. This saga forced Berhalter and his wife to make a joint statement confirming that it did indeed happen, but they worked through it together almost 30 years ago. It also forced US Soccer to launch an investigation, and in that investigation it came out that the Reynas were consistently putting pressure on higher-ups to treat their son better at every level that he got to. The whole affair felt alarmingly juvenile for a national program. In 2024, the United States hosted the Copa America, expanded to include North American teams. Plus, the tournament was being held on American soil. group stage exit after losses to Uruguay and the indomitable Panama. In the rubble of that Copa America, conversations that had been long ongoing became louder. The problems run deeper than any one coach or one tournament. The conversation shifted, rightly, to the structural issues that continue to burden American soccer. Issues such as the pay-to-play model in youth development. In the US, aspiring youth players often have to join expensive clubs and travel teams to get high-level training. Costs can run into thousands of dollars per year for families. Imagine being a prospect in California and having to pay $10,000 per year just to get access to a pitch or halfway decent coaching. It's a very inexpensive sport, and the fact that we've made youth soccer a business is, I think, detrimental to the sport. The words of Alex Morgan, two-time World Cup champion. The women's team is fantastic. Like I said, they deserve their own video on their success and how it all happened. But it's an open secret that many of these players came from families earning far more than enough to spare some change for soccer practice. The biggest problem with the pay-to-play model is that clubs are effectively fighting over clients. Kevin Chin, a South Floridian coach. There's definitely an argument to be made that children from less privileged backgrounds develop stronger drive than those that do not. I'm not actually going to explore this argument because it's inherently laced with landmines of socioeconomic bias. All I'm saying is, imagine how good these guys could be if the game was more accessible to the entire talent pool. Which then brings us to the actual effectiveness of local development. Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Gio Reyna, Tim Weah, Josh Sargent, Folarin Balogun, all these players left for European academies before they turned 17. And then, of course, there's guys like Johnny Cardoso, who was born in the US but moved to Brazil at 3 months old. Or Anthony Robinson, who was born in Milton Keynes but whose father is an American citizen. These are the players that make up the spine of the next 10 years of American football. The point I'm trying to make is that there is obviously a wealth of homegrown talent for the world's most popular sport within the borders of the world's largest superpower. There are 14-year-olds making MLS debuts. This Kevin Sullivan does look like the real deal, which is probably why he will more than likely move to a European academy in the next couple of years. It seems criminal to not do everything possible to foster it at home. It's not like they don't have the means. And listen, as I'm saying this, I'm well aware that it's not as easy as talking this kind of stuff into existence. It takes years, decades, centuries, even more in the case of the largest football spaces around the world, in Europe particularly, to build this kind of infrastructure from top to bottom. But we do live in the here and now, and I believe talking about these sort of things does foster discourse and potentially change. There is a lot that we could table for discussion pertaining to the general infrastructure problems, and we've touched on it here and there, but because of how convoluted it all is, this video has mostly been sticking to the pitch outside of this final section at the very least. But that brings us to the final point of the day. The likability of the current players and overall team. The willingness to do everything for the flag. Do these players have it in the way the Donovans, Dempseys, or Howards did? Seeing them crash out of the 2025 Nations League to the ever-mighty Panama was too much to handle for some. Were the boys even trying? Is this it? Is this all this so-called generation can offer? I've spoken about the sense of togetherness displayed by their supporters despite poor results over the decades. How long will that persist?